Hey, so I realized that, this video took a little while to come out. September was an extremely busy month. We ended up going to Disney, which, obviously didn't happen last minute. We had it planned, but it ended up taking a lot more time with the packing and unpacking than I initially thought. And also, my schoolwork, I had a lot of papers due, like right around that same time, so that really kind of sucked. Also, I got a haircut. Sorry about that jump scare. I had wanted this video to come out mid-September, but it didn't. So you get early October, and you get a half-hearted promise from me that the next one will come out sooner than this one did. With that out of the way, we can start talking about the topic at hand, which is another soundtrack that does not get the love it deserves.
I want to take this time to introduce you to one of our most recent creations.
This Unsung soundtrack is going to be a little different than the last one because there's only 3 tracks in the PC release of LEGO Rock Raiders. Now, there were more in the PlayStation release, but I didn't play that one, so I don't feel qualified to comment on it regarding, nostalgia and vibes and how well the game works with the soundtrack because I didn't grow up with it. I never really played that game, so it would feel disingenuous to just sort of listen to the soundtrack and then say, oh yeah, this song sounds good. Whereas I can really kind of get into the feeling of the PC release because I played too much of this game. Additionally, towards the end, we'll also be talking about a really cool project, Manic Miners, which is a complete rebuild of LEGO Rock Raiders. It's one of the most faithful rebuilds I've ever seen of a game, and I really like it, and I just wanted to talk about it because I want it to get the love and attention that it deserves. We're also going to sort of go over the history of Rock Raiders a little bit, just to give us something more to talk about than just the 3 tracks. So, with that little preamble out of the way, let's start talking about LEGO Rock Raiders. So, LEGO Rock Raiders was introduced as a theme in 1999 and went until about 2000, and it came with some absolutely awesome LEGO sets. I'm pretty sure I had all of them. If not all of them, I had the vast majority of them. It's also one of the themes that came with a video game, a surprisingly good one at that. Rock Raiders was my introduction to the concept of a real-time strategy game, a genre that has become one of my favorites, and I really think that it started with this game. It's a really solid strategy game that's decently difficult, and for its time, had a lot of really fun mechanics and challenges built into it. The game is said to have been inspired by Christian Faber's unreleased LEGO theme called Cybots, which we can see was confirmed in this old blogspot post from Faber himself. And while Cybots never got fully released, there were prototypes and concept art that we can see now that had been worked on. And let me just say, I'm so glad this stuff never saw the light of day. The concept art is really cool. It's got that 90s Saturday morning sci-fi cartoon vibe, which I absolutely love. Just like this picture looks like something I would be super into. The sets, however, were not as good. As you can see, it's sort of like this weird amalgamation of a Lego set and an action figure, and I'm not really sure what they were going for, but it kind of just looks like something that you'd find crawling out from underneath Sid's bed in Toy Story. So I can see why it never got released, but it did give us Lego Rock Raiders, so that's something. The early concept art for Lego Rock Raiders was pretty different than what the theme ended up being, but it still looks really cool, and if we had gotten this, I would still be pretty happy with it, because it was also said, along with the inspiration from Cybots, that Rock Raiders was also inspired by books like Dinotopia, which I loved. You know, I was a kid in the 90s. I was into dinosaurs. But the theme went through a few design changes over, the 8 months it was being developed, and we ended up with just an absolute banger of a theme. Rock Raiders is perfect all the way through. I love it. The books were great. The sets were great. The video game was absolutely great. So, Rock Raiders, as I said, is a real-time strategy game in which you command a group of miners who are traversing these tunnels in an alien planet, searching for a resource called energy crystals, which can power their ship so they can go back through a wormhole to get home. Apparently, they have a wormhole generator on board their ship. This is some pretty high concept sci-fi stuff. So throughout the game, you have to contend with various hazards like rock slides and lava erosion and lack of oxygen, all the way over to territorial monsters like rock and ice monsters, as well as slimy slugs, which will take your energy crystals and suck the energy out of them and make them inert, which super sucks. There's also spiders and bats. It's an alien planet, but it's got spiders and bats. I don't really know how that works, but, we don't question, we just play. The overall vibe and theming of this game is absolutely immaculate. You really get the sense that you are in just vast, empty tunnels, trying your best to survive and get the resources that you need. And it's... I think it works really well. And the cohesiveness of the vibe that the game presents you with is bolstered greatly by the soundtrack. So the artist Temple Sound created 3 tracks for this game, and they're all perfect. There's not a bad one. There's not one that I'm like, oh, it's kind of good. They're all perfect. They're great. They all feature some really solid drum and bass grooves with various atmospheric pads and melodies and really solid bass lines. So the first track, Rock, starts out with some various noises like this drill sound and what I think of as sort of like a hammering kind of sound, and a very drippy sounding synth, which gives us the hints of the melody to come. As the percussion builds, we get some chords and a couple more instruments before we get the real melody. And this melody has popped in and out of my head since 2000. It's great. It's one of my favorite melodies overall in gaming. I think it's just such a good song. I will say this one is probably the least cave sounding. It gives me more of a job site industrial sort of vibe, so it feels more like I'm at the base working on something, less like I'm exploring the cave. But that doesn't detract from the atmosphere of the game, considering a lot of your work is done at the base. So it fills in that industrial kind of vibe that the other tracks don't focus on as much. The next track, Ice, might be my favorite. The sounds that this track open with really give the sense of being in an icy cave. You get the faint dripping of water and like these little wind gust kind of sounds through big empty tunnels, and then you've got the shimmering sound that I think a lot of us associate with ice and snow visuals. The bass line for this track when it comes in is a lot of fun. It's this kind of like talky sort of wah bass, but it leaves a lot of room for the drum groove to sit on. So the rhythm section of this track is very solid, and it creates a good bed for this kind of slidey melody to rest on top of, along with all of the various atmospheric sounds. Overall, this song really solidifies the vibe of being in an icy cave. It works with the visuals very well, and it just enhances this idea of, oh, I'm in this cold, icy cave, you know. It just all works together very well. The last track in the game, yeah, we're already at the last track. There's not a lot in this game, but we're going quality over quantity with this soundtrack. The last track is called Lava, and it goes so hard. It opens up with a lot of airy, deep, rumbling, reverbed atmosphere, which kind of gives me the mental image of like lava tunnels with, you know, the far off sound of like grinding liquid stone. Maybe that's why it's called lava. I don't know. But all of that sort of builds, and it lets you sit in that atmosphere for a little bit before dropping just a super hard drum and bass groove that just absolutely slaps. And it kind of just lets you sit there with the groove for a little bit before you get an atmospheric break, which, I mean, you know, it just builds on that feeling of being in an empty lava tube a little bit more before we get a second drum and bass groove. And that carries us through pretty much to the end of the track. This track has very little in the way of like brighter melody kind of synth, but I think that really fits the theme of Lava, because you're not going to get the sort of shimmering that you would get with an ice tunnel or the higher pitched industrial grinding and whining sounds that you would get when you're working on machinery. This is just an empty lava cave. All you're hearing is the roiling of melted stone. So I think that it works really well, and I think that it builds onto the atmosphere that the levels are presenting you with. I also think that the tempo of the track does not help with the anxiety that a lot of the lava-based levels present you with, because you'll start out. There's one level in particular where you start out right on the edge of a lava lake, and they're like, hey, you've got to work fast. The lava's eroding. And 8-year-old me didn't know what erosion was really, and then I just watched as the land that I had to work with got eaten away by lava, and that, along with this really fast drum and bass groove, was stressful. Overall, it's a great track. The whole soundtrack is just immaculate. It's perfect. I could probably listen to this every day and not get upset with it. So the game was, I believe the game was my introduction to strategy games. Lego Rock Raiders is probably the reason that I sought out things like SimCity 4 or Civilization or Command and Conquer, games like that. This sort of was my introduction into that realm, and God, what a good introduction it was. Along with that, the soundtrack was my introduction into like atmospheric drum and bass and jungle music. And of course, that genre sort of became a staple in the early 2000s with PlayStation 2 era gaming. There was a lot of that sort of drum and bass sound that was kind of the theme of, I think about SSX Tricky, and just, other games like that, where that sort of like atmospheric sound with driving drum grooves became sort of the defining sound for a very short period of time, and it was a very good period of time. But overall, the way that the soundtrack and the visuals work together to create this cohesive vibe of the game, it worked out very well. It created a very tangible idea of what the game wanted to present you with. I can vividly remember sitting in my second grade classroom, completely ignoring my teacher, and instead imagining that I was in a cave listening to these sounds, directing Rock Raiders on where to go and what to work on. And I think I think it created such a cohesive space within my imagination because the visuals and the audio worked so well together. It also doesn't help that I had an incredibly overactive imagination as a child, and when I got bored, I could just go somewhere else. But I was absolutely obsessed with Rock Raiders as a kid. I had, like I said, I believe most, if not all, of the sets, and I read all the books. Rock Raiders was my life for a couple of years. And that's why I was so happy when I found Manic Miners. So, Manic Miners is a project run by a person who goes by the name Baraklava. At least I think that's how you say it. They began remaking Rock Raiders in 2019, and have been working tirelessly since then to create one of the most faithful remakes of a video game I think I've ever seen. The classic campaign mode, it just feels exactly like Rock Raiders, and it just looks the way you would have remembered it looking back in, 1999. While the classic campaign, is just exactly Rock Raiders to the T with some bug fixes and AI fixes. There's other things that the game comes with that, the original one didn't have the ability to give you. Like there's a level editor, so you can create custom scenarios with their own objectives and things like that. And there's also a custom character maker with tons of character, building options, and a lot of them are based in classic Lego video game or Lego set themes. I'm pretty sure you can just straight up build Pepper from Lego Island, so that's pretty cool, because then when you summon Rock Raiders, your custom characters will show up. So it's a lot of fun. Overall, all around, Manic Miners is a phenomenal project, and I can't thank Baraklava enough for the work that they have done in recreating this game, because not only did it give me the ability to replay my childhood favorite game in a faithful remake that works well on modern hardware, it also gave me the ability to share this game with my kids who couldn't look at the old version super well without being like, why is it so ugly? Because, you know, they didn't grow up with Windows 98 graphics. They don't understand. So overall, I mean, it's great to have, and I feel like it's definitely a work, a labor of love from Baraklava, and it really shows, you know, in the final product how much they care about the original material. And the other thing that makes it so great is that it's totally free. So you can just go and download it. I'll have it linked below. I will also have the link to Temple Sound's Bandcamp linked below, so that you can go and buy the high quality soundtrack, so that you don't have to listen to the audio ripped from the game, and you can get like the full quality, which is what I've been using throughout this video. You really get a lot more of the vibe that you want, and it's just, there's so much more clarity in the sound. It's great. Absolutely worth purchasing if you're a fan of these games. So that's pretty much it for Rock Raiders. It's short, but it's absolutely perfect. If you're still here, you know, thank you for watching. Don't forget to, you know, subscribe, like the video, and comment, because I love talking about, you know, nostalgic video games and old soundtracks and stuff like that. So, you know, be sure to maybe suggest some other ones for me to cover, because these first two, SimCity 4 and Rock Raiders, were just the first two games that popped into my mind when I was theorizing this series. So from here on out, I'm going to be consulting like lists of the top video game soundtracks of all time, and then by process of elimination, finding video games that I think should be near those lists. And the next one is one that I personally can't believe is not on any of the lists that I looked at. It's absolutely criminal that no one talks about the Kingdom Hearts soundtrack. So prepare for me to go off about that one, because I absolutely love those games. So be sure to, you know, subscribe and stick around. I should have the next video out sooner than this one came out, but we'll see. There is some deity out there that is just dedicating its time to making sure that I can't make videos on time. So I will do my best, but I think I'm fighting a god. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you will be around for the next one. And if you haven't watched my other videos, go ahead and watch those too. They're pretty good.